Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining us, and welcome once again to another teissTalk. Our first teissTalk since coming back from Teiss London, which, if you were there, it was lovely to see you. Hope you all had a great time. We today are going to be talking about cyber resiliency. We've got some great panelists for you. Well, very much experts, and we've even got our tea, coffee, and biscuits sponsored as well. But I'll come to all that in just one moment. The first real notice, or in fact, the only real notice, is of course the mug. You can win a teissTalk mug, a much coveted item. I'm not sure why, but they are nonetheless. If you ask us a good, an interesting, a funny, or just memorable question, it doesn't matter what. So please do keep us on our toes, keep our panelists on our toes with your questions, and I will announce an entirely random winner at the end. So without further ado, let me bring on to stage Daniel, Mike, and Sam. Hello, Daniel.
Evening all. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. And Daniel, in a change to our regular programming, has come in last minute. He's replacing Samantha, who is actually off ill. So if I do call Daniel Samantha, it's purely because I couldn't be bothered to update my notes. So please don't be offended. Hello, Mike.
Hi there, all.
And hello, Sam.
Hey, everyone. Nice to see everyone.
And Sam is the one with a book to sell. Obviously, he is our sponsor this week. 1111 is the name of the company. Thank you very much, Sam. Much appreciated. What you do here, what you've done is allow us to all get together. So thank you. But let's start, shall we, with the news item. It's from SC Media. The headline is ChatGPT credentials snagged by info stealers on 225,000 infected devices. This is a nice little turnaround, actually, isn't it? The attackers have attacked AI rather than the AI attacking everybody else. But this, again, another 225,000 credentials being stolen. This is just a drop in the ocean, surely.
I think from my side, right, I think this kind of shows the threats that everyone is facing, right, in terms of malicious software, malicious ransomware, things like that, going out to the businesses, right? I think for a lot of people, they're seeing this on a daily, weekly, if more frequent basis. And in this example, 225,000 infected devices or credentials. Obviously, that's obviously a big deal for a lot of organizations, specifically with this article as well. The things that an organization could potentially do with that privileged access to those systems. I know it's talking a lot around the fact that with that access, that potentially private information from those organizations has gone into those systems. Obviously, that can be a big challenge for those organizations going forward. So for me, I think definitely shows the growing threat that organizations are facing. And then from that, the damage that potentially can then be caused as a result of that as well.
It gets my imagination going, just thinking, okay, on a grand scale of number of records stolen, that's probably, not huge, as we've said, but is it actually helping to feed? Will they use that? Will they use artificial intelligence now to try and profile the kind of access which is required and the way that these things are used? Will they use those credentials not just to steal what people are doing, but perhaps to start manipulating the models? I mean, if it's going on for ChatGPT, so this could be the sort of vanguard, maybe not deliberately, but perhaps it's the vanguard of new types of, okay, I will use the word attack. I'm desperately trying to find some other non-cyber warfare type of stuff or wording for the kinds of things. Incidents. It's probably more than just incidents, more than events, but attack, too distracting.
Yeah.
I'll be the slight cynic that I think this attack doesn't represent a worry. I'd be interested to know the types of logins that have been stolen. We know that people get their credentials stolen a lot. Sam says, yeah, I agree. It's worrying to see loads of infected devices. But it seems to me a great way to potentially be a data breach. But if anybody ever logged into my ChatGPT instance, they'd see, please show a picture of a cat in a Baroque artwork painting. How worrying. Where it could be a concern, I guess, is if companies start deploying ChatGPT or Copilot on their enterprise piece, and then it really could do damage, like a law firm, if they deployed it, and then you could log in that way. But I guess that what it really does there is makes pause for thought. If we're going to use AI in our organization, we need to be seriously hot on how we appropriately risk assess what does it have authorization to access, and also the authentication we have to make sure we've done the proper due diligence, so that it's difficult.
I agree, and because I think, last year, and we've said it on this show many times, 2023 was the year of AI. It saw a massive explosion because it came out late 22, like everything, the bell curve of interest, massive explosion of use. People probably very quickly signed up to it, not necessarily implementing 2FA, or even in some of these fledgling AI accounts, even had the opportunity to. And then started uploading or using it for company business without the company even realizing. So there's potentially a vast amount of data on here. So these stolen credentials were part of the logs offered for sale on the dark web marketplace. So there's potentially a lot of other data in there. So yes, I think you're right. We've got to be really cautious of this as enterprises because of how people are using this with our best interests at heart, but with ultimately the worst outcomes.
Yeah, I personally feel like if you look at this, the news article itself, it talks about the fact that only 4.7% of employees actually pasted sensitive data. But I think the reality as well is that with the evolution of things like Copilot, getting people more access to AI systems within their enterprises and their businesses, I personally feel that that percentage will rise, right? So it becomes more and more important for organizations to think about how they secure their access credentials for those systems, but the rest of their business, right? Organizations have data, apps, services that are leveraging across all sorts of different platforms, and having a good policy around how they maintain those credentials, how frequently those credentials change, is really essential with the nature of the data going into those systems itself, right?
But that's still 11,000 odd people who've uploaded sensitive information in just this case.
Yeah, I was also going to say that 43.7% of people probably lied as to whether they uploaded data in the first place. That's a made-up stat, of course. But yeah, I mean, who's going to be honest? Also, with the the crafting of prompts, are people more ready and perhaps less cautious about the phrase I use in opening the digital kimono up to the technology to try and manipulate the data? I mean, it's eminently more flexible. There's so much more that you can do with this. So to get more out of it, usual thing, you have to put more in. People probably are even thinking there's a personality around it, imitation game, etc., etc., etc. So I wonder if people get more relaxed when using these artificial intelligence, large language model type, generative AI type tools than they would be if it's a straightforward, please put your username and password into this form.
Yeah. There's a sense of safety almost, isn't it?
I think it doesn't help because it seems like it's so eager to please. You feel, oh, of course I'll give you a bit more information. You're very nice. Of course I'll just give you. Well, I wasn't going to tell you that sensitive pricing data, but since you asked nicely and it will help the answer, sure, have that. So
yeah.
I feel at the moment there might not be that much in there, but assume organizations start taking up Copilot en masse, this could be a really dangerous thing. So in some ways, it's almost good that it's happened now. And hopefully, I think Rob said in the chat, how many organizations have policies. From what I've seen talking to people, not many. I hope this makes people pause for thought and go, actually, I need to risk assess the use of LLM in my business and make a really strict policy and control it with filtering.
And what I would say there, I think across security in general, I think one of the most important things that any organization can do is to focus on education and enablement, and not just do a one-time thing every single year, but this needs to be a continuous education process with the end users and employees. Think about what you're putting in these systems, have policies, educate people on those policies, and understand what the risk is of putting that data in these types of systems as well.
And
because
sorry.
Go on.
If say security, to that end, we need to be friends. We need to get on with everyone. So when I'm a developer, and this is great, go just before they do it, go, actually, you know what, Sam, Danny, you've heard of this ChatGPT thing. What's your view on it? Is it okay for me to do this?
Yeah.
And also, I think we need to make it easier for people as well to build in the safeguards. So we don't want to fall into the traditional training model of here's some training. Now you're going to be working under pressure. Just remember what we told you last month, or the month before that, or the month before that. So perhaps now in these are the early days. We need to be investigating ways of helping people, and maybe having our own. Maybe it's having our own internal AI, which helps people to say, do you really want to prompt that, or to bring whether people can bring more of these models in-house. I don't know. Early days yet. People understanding the risks, but being able to craft a policy, which is just kind of a remember and don't do this. I mean, that hasn't really done very much for us.
Yeah, we've got to be more. It's a great opportunity to not be either entirely toothless or the flip side, the business prevention unit, because it's a great tool. It can be used very effectively, and there are plenty of use cases in organizations to use AI, but we really don't want to be the ones who are just saying no, or conversely just letting everybody run roughshod over all the work that we've done up till now. So it is another tipping point, I think, in the journey of AI.
Would it be great, because if you say to AI these days, or most when I've been playing around, write me a phishing. You've got to socially engineer them if you want them to write you a phishing email.
Yeah.
If you say write me a phishing email, it won't do it. If you say, well, what would I need to do to avoid a spam filter? It'll then basically give you all the input for that. So if there are already a bit of policing, surely the technology is there to say, are you sure you want to tell us that? And also so once having put into that put that information in, I think one of the big questions, and this is like is it the general the Wolf acronym, write once, lose forever. Once you put it out there, can we actually extract stuff? Is there a hindsight? Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Can we take that out of the model? Which of course, I think, are people going to be using these credentials or the stolen credentials to get into models and essentially put in prompts which the things will learn from and then poison the models?
Yeah, there's a great comment here actually from Robert, who says, heard of one company who were using just-in-time prompts. Are you sure you want to share this data with an external site? I think that's a great place to start, right?
Nice.
So I think let's segue across into the panel proper. We've talked about, we've got these threats coming through AI and how it's being hammered to work against us. Well, how can we be a little bit more resilient about it? So, well, why don't we start with what is resilience? Is it resilience is just the ability to stand up to an attack, isn't it?
I think it's the banking definition, which essentially says that resilience is being able to absorb a problem rather than compounding it and adding to it and making things worse.
To me, what I believe is resilient is that as well, is how can we kind of withstand, can we prevent, how can we not become the next kind of news story in effect. That's one part of the puzzle, but also ultimately there's going to be the case where maybe there is a data breach, maybe there is the capability where ransomware has mitigated systems and you've got loss of availability. I think for me, it's kind of a multi-layered approach. You need to think about not only how you prevent and how you secure, but also if the worst happens, do you have that defined process internally Do you have the mix of technology, people, and process ultimately to help you recover the business, get it back up and running, get the data back? What is the clear process? So I think at a general level, it's about prevention and recovery. And I think often for us, when we're working with organizations, a lot of the time they're missing one of those two things, right? They're very well looking after security, but maybe they're missing the recovery angle, or vice versa. So I think it's about looking at this holistically and looking at the core areas that you need to go after as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's interesting. Loads of businesses often in a moment of a crisis don't necessarily directly have it for certain things, but it's also thinking more creatively that they often have the skills and knowledge. They just need to think where it's from. And the great example is kind of like, in a physical world example, I remember having in the past speaking to people, they said, I need a terrorism policy. And you go, well, what's your fire? What do you do in the event of a fire? Well, do exactly the same thing. It's probably going to protect you. And then in resilience strategy, now if you ask people nowadays, it's, well, what's your alternative means of working? Like, oh, we don't have a failover site. Yes, you do. Tell everyone to bugger off home and work from home on their laptop. Or, oh, we don't have a backup internet connection. You don't issue corporate phones to your staff, and so they can tether. Oh yeah, we do. And
yeah,
I think
so
that's
a lot
really
of it is hidden. Sorry, do go on, Sam.
No, I think that's a really interesting point. I think that we're also seeing, right? There's a difference between general business resilience and cyber resilience, right? If we think about the kind of the historical world of disaster recovery and traditional disaster planning, it maybe was meteorological, floods, fires, terrorism, things like that. But cyber recovery and cyber resiliency is a completely different kind of concept, right? And it needs new planning, new strategies, new technologies, for example, to counter those threats, right? You may not be able to go to the last point in time in a cyber recovery scenario because the cyber attack may have been lying dormant in your environment for 30, 60, 90 days or more. And so maybe you're going to have to go back to historical backups, for example, to recover the business. So I think as businesses are looking at this whole concept, think of it in this new world of cyber incidents, cyber attacks, and how you can ultimately, again, prevent and recover in those types of scenarios again.
I think. Oh, go on, Tony.
Sorry, I was going to say there's no secret that last year we had our own incident here in Manchester, and I think one of the core activities that our relatively new CISO, what a great start to a job, used or did when she was, pulling out all the stops to minimize the impact and to make sure that we recovered, was the focus on welfare. Because that to me is there as a foundation. It's bringing. I mean, we kind of swing between technology and human factors. Well, cyber attack, the technology goes away or isn't behaving the way that we'd like it. So actually, it's the human side you've really got to protect, and that's just that's your own employees, the people who hopefully will continue to benefit from the systems rather than become victims of it. To use the Peter Checkland type of language, the relationships with suppliers and your supply chain. Investors, shareholders, all of this kind of stuff. If those relationships are kept well and nurtured, then it takes also the burden off the people who might be trying to do the technical fix. And while that is going on, there's likely to be a lot of unhappy people who will just be generally frustrated, or some people even generally scared that, the technology has gone away, they're not going to be able to do their job. And although I was saying I wanted to move away from kind of the warfare aspect of it. This was just coincidence. This was actually on my desk already today because I've just stepped in last minute. But my wife and I, we like trawling around antiques and collectors fairs. This was not what I actually went for. I mean, obviously, I'm looking for Doctor Who annuals. She's looking for a much more cultured ephemera. But my eyes took to that, and I'm looking at that, thinking, here is all of this knowledge and understanding. This was that pamphlet was written in the 50s, using the learning of obviously what had gone on in the unpleasantness of the 40s. and why there are stuff that we can translate, because let's face it, on the whole, we haven't evolved that much in the last 70 years, 80 years, whatever. How can we actually apply that to the people involved? Keep those people in all of those different roles, with those different interests in our systems and our organizations and supply chains, etc., etc., etc. If we can make sure that they are feeling good, or at least not too bad, then
not bad, yeah.
we can minimize the so-called attack into a so what in so many different places.
It's interesting how so many conversations we've been having over the last 6 to 12 months have very much fallen between the technology and the people, and how we look after the people, but how we tend to focus so much more on the technology. But actually, it's the people that underpin everything.
I mean, to support that, Danny, to your point, I completely agree. I like saying in incident response situations, most technical problems are people problems. And to a further point on that, though, exactly as you say, those relationships are key. Maersk, obviously, when they suffered their major ransomware attack, they had negligible, really long-term damage because they had the comms and they had the good relationships. They explained to people what's going on. So people who might have been eligible for liquidated damages penalties on business contracts went, you know what, this is fine. It's not. We understand this is horrible. We're not going to try and sue you. And they kept the top-down message of do what's right for the customer. Corporate will back you, and they didn't keep a crazily strict plan. So they went, right, here's the core guiding principle. Don't worry, we're gonna get through this. The show must go on. And yeah, it's like your manual shows, Danny. They look after the people, and it'll get you there.
But I think it's that flexibility, isn't it? The technology tends not to give that flexibility, whereas people will. Comment in here from Peter Fink. Hello, Peter. My previous organisation had amazing disaster recovery plans with alternative and redundant work sites, etc. Then the pandemic hit and none of our plans and training was valid anymore. Resilience is beyond the strict plan. It's the ability to adapt fast enough before the 10 count. So that's very true. And I think, if we focus more on our people, we're going to have a much better chance. Although auditors would kind of see that more as a tribal knowledge rather than an evidential knowledge. Your recovery plan can't be, well, we pay our staff well, and look after their mental health. They want actual plans, right?
Yeah, I think for us as well, like change is constant, right? In our industry, I think the comment is perfect. And so for us as well, process is really key between linking the people and the technology piece. But I think any effective cyber resilience strategy or recovery plan needs to be tested. And I think that's one thing that we've seen historically from our experience is that organizations maybe have a lack of testing in terms of their planning and their process. Doing simulation and tabletop exercises really is key, because I think if we get to the heart of one of these discussion points, which is metrics, I think the only way to get to define metrics that you can report back to the board and to the business and understand how long is it going to take me to get back up and running, or how will I respond in this way and how long it's going to take, is to effectively test. And I think if you do that, to Peter's point, you can understand where you now have gaps or where change has developed that allows you or means that you have to evolve your planning. So I think a constant regime of testing and user engagement and education is, again, really key to making sure that if something happens, you have a plan and you know how it's going to operate as well.
Yeah, and to do that,
sorry,
I was going to say just that plan needs to be sort of high level enough that you adapt, because as everyone knows, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, and the test is great for just thinking, what's our rough approach to this?
Yeah.
Sorry, Danny.
No, it's fine. But I think it's people don't realize that actually they are testing their resilience all the time. Things are going. I mean, culture, learning. Bad things happen all the time. I mean, okay, maybe I might be slightly more technical than most, but because of moving different locations, I had a small crisis this morning where it looked as if I was going to lose a whole load of emails, and so I had to internalize that feeling of crisis, get it fixed. Did I call the help desk? Well, actually, I didn't, because it was on a personal. It was on a personal machine. But learning from these small disasters of actually, you haven't got access to that email. What are you going to do about it? Learning, and so we can be calm about it. So two things: when these things happen, can we actually easily recover from them and actually be glad that they've happened, because they should give us an emotional inoculation for when the bad stuff happens, and we should be calm, more calm about it, and possibly even having had that thought as to who we shall contact, rather than having to work out how we fill in and raise a ticket, etc., etc., which of course is going to be a problem if you can't get access to the system.
Yeah. I want to go back to a point Sam made about, keeping track of your changing environments, etc. And a question from John Acornley, which was, are there any great examples of dashboards that can be used by corporate boards to demonstrate cyber resilience and or vulnerability? And I think it's, yes, it's good to have the softer side of things in hand with our people, etc. But we sometimes need to be able to demonstrate that. What sort of things should we be looking at?
That is not only a very good question, it's officially recognized as a question. That's on NCSC's 5 problems in their problem book. Basically says, how do we measure security? We all know when it fails. How do we know when it's going well? And how do we know how far it's pushed? I did see some interesting stuff that Netflix do. They have this thing, I don't know, actually it was a few years ago. I don't know whether they still do have this Simian army that they called it. And essentially they're poking and prodding and trying to make things fail all the time, so that they can bring them back up. So that really is a live environment. Perhaps after all of these years of saying, oh, this is going to go live, perhaps now, and we talking before about artificial intelligence, perhaps almost in a Frankenstein way, we can start to say, and when we look at all of our boxes and wires, it's alive.
Chaos Monkey's particularly aggressive. I have a friend in testing who doesn't touch that, but it's a good point, and that you raised the NCSC as well. I was working with someone recently where we used the NCSC's board reporting toolkit. Essentially, we just made for that, we were look to see, let's make a Power BI and take the categories that the toolkit does and put a metric to each one that we think is objective and we can define. So that might be something like maximum tolerable period of disruption. So, and you can discuss that with the board and go, cool, what should that be? Are we hitting that? Or it might be things like, how many vulnerabilities do we have in our system? Use a framework. I mean, the classic one is obviously the NIST CSF, but you can use the NCSC materials and put an objective stat by each one and put a scale. And you could do a 1 to 5 scale of how well are we doing for it. Sure, it looks a bit like a GRC dashboard. It's not perfect, but if you shape the metrics in such a way as it's for how will we survive? And if you set a level that we need to be at 3 or 4 or whatever it might be, it's a good starting point. And if you just look something through one of these frameworks, it's a good way. And you start going, okay, I need to demonstrate I'm doing asset management. How would I manage that, objectively speaking, to do that?
Yeah, I think for me, I think things like mean time to detect, mean time to recover, what is my incident response time? I think measuring things like that, having them on dashboards, things like that, help you not only understand where you're at now, but also where does the business want to be? What does good look like? How are those metrics improving over time? Obviously, back to things like testing and validation and visibility. I think having those types of metrics, again, gives you an idea of where you're at now, but also where you want to be. And that's really critical to help evolve and become more resilient to these type of attacks as well.
It's potentially a vast number of measurements, though, isn't it?
It is vast, and I think that's one of the issues that you have with security is just the general amount of sheer volume of alerting and data that you have, right? And I think technology is great, but unless you can tune down the noise to what is actually important, I think it can not get you to the place you want to be, right? So I think it's a mixture of taking the right technology, tuning it in a way, but also having the right expertise to actually be able to interpret that data and have eyes on that at all times. And I think that's one of the challenges that we've seen is a lot of businesses have invested in technology to solve the security challenge, but that's adding a lot of noise, and they just don't have the time or the skill set to actually be able to take what's being shown to them and improve upon what they have. And so I think, again, with all of these things, it's a mixture of the technology, but also the people, the expertise, and the process to actually be able to get better at the defense structure that you have as an organization.
Danny, you were saying something.
I think defense there is actually quite a key word, because I remember when working in that sector, there was a whole load of things we had to deliver or build into the projects. One of which was the ARM stuff. Now you say ARM these days, everybody thinks chips, but then it was you had to provide the tools, methods, and stats for availability, reliability, and maintainability. And so what we're talking about is essentially building in resilience in the same way that it took us, I don't know how many years to start saying, oh, shouldn't we build security in? Of course, a lot of the systems we have are going to be in place still for many years. So it's how they can absorb security. Because it's too late to build it in. And fine, so it might be sometimes where it might be too complicated or too expensive, but let's at least be honest about that. Can we say, yes, that is, we're not doing it because we can't afford it? As the song goes, accept the risk.
Yes, it's a very good song, actually, very good song. I think I'm going to say a dirty word now. So, what about insurance? Does insurance count as some kind of resiliency? Because if nothing else, it potentially gives us something to fall back on, i.e. a pot of cash. In some cases, we can start spending some money. But is there a role for insurance in this sort of cyber resilience strategy?
I'd say there is, because for a mixture of reasons. I've got most importantly, I've got a friend who his incident response policy, I love it. Step one is call the insurer, because they're smart, you are dumb. They have access to the specialisms that you probably don't. So the insurer can straight away get you all the best in class things, which means that you will probably get a much swifter resolution to an incident. They will get forensic specialists, they will get incident responders who say, no, don't just start unplugging the servers, because you will corrupt data and then it will take you months to get back online. So I think that's one of the really valuable things insurers can do in being a gateway to lots of the services you want. So if everyone knows something goes bad with the computer, or the SOC team knows something's a major incident, call the insurer, because then we get the payout, then we get the skills we really need. And that is it gets you the help you need and the skills and technology you probably need. That's one of the best things an insurer can provide you with, I think.
So we
to
probably
me,
need
I guess
the
okay.
So I was going to say,
I was just going to say the cyber insurance piece obviously is giving you the financial piece, right, to help you with the financial losses piece, potentially with the cost related to remediation. But I think if you're lacking the right structure, the right technology, again, people process in advance to actually have a strategy to recover your data, then potentially your only option is to potentially in a ransomware incident, for example, to pay the ransom, right? And that might involve using your policy for the financial piece around that. But I think if you're looking to recover as quickly as possible, reduce the reputational damage, reduce the lack of availability, you're going to need to, before you have an incident take place, have invested in the right pieces to ultimately give you a route to recover the organization. If you don't have that, the cyber insurance potentially is going to give you a financial aspect, but potentially won't help you get the data back, right? It's not guaranteed. So I think it's just one component part, again, I think, of this overall strategy is to have this in place, but alongside that, all of the other pieces that you're going to need. I think also the thing that I just also like to comment on as well with cyber insurance is it's becoming increasingly more difficult to obtain cyber insurance in the first place. And also, if you want to claim against cyber insurance after an incident's taken place, unless you've demonstrated the things that you've signed up for in the first place to get the policy, you may not get the payout, right? So I think back to the complexity of achieving cyber insurance, I think those insurance agencies have realized that they need to make sure that the customer is doing something for security, is doing something for data protection, recovery, immutability for recovery of data. they won't actually potentially give you a policy unless you're meeting specific pieces that they see as just best practice for a business as well.
Which, to be fair, in some ways helps you become resilient, because in order to get insurance premium, you have to meet their requirements.
You have to have a certain amount of maturity. Danny, you were going to say something.
I mean, I think we should include insurance, as part of our supply chain, as part of our strategy. Not the usual thing. I mean, people use this awful phrase about transferring risk. Oh yeah, we've transferred the risk. No, it's still your organisation who's going to suffer reputationally. Again, back to the welfare thing. It's your staff who are going to suffer. Some might lose, be out of work. Whatever it might be. So you've got to look at the whole part of the supply chain. I'm a little nervous that I was picking up. There's been some really good discussion with Kieran Martin, ex of NCSC, now of Oxford, I think, and the payment of ransoms, because we don't want an industry which is used to getting insurance to pay ransoms, because that's a lovely business model for those that we're actually trying to protect our systems against. So I think it's important to have it in there. It's great if it does encourage the good security behaviours. We've all been asked when doing our house insurance, what kind of locks you've got on the window. Although interesting, talking to a locksmith saying, well, actually, once you've, with your modern windows, once you've closed them, there's no point locking them, because they're gonna have to smash the window anyway to get inside to open to actually open it. Car insurance, we're expected to drive carefully and not be stupid. Otherwise, our premiums go up. So the foundation rules are actually there. Yeah, cybersecurity is complicated. I think hopefully we've moved away, or certainly moving away from the sort of the j'accuse, or the pointing the finger that everybody pleased that it wasn't them. It is a community thing, because the watershed that the attacker, attack again, sorry, the criminals, nation states, all those different categories will go for the so-called low-hanging fruit, in the same way that house with a burglar alarm, house not with a burglar alarm, supposedly, I don't know whether there's been any studies, it's the unprotected one, but on the whole, one would hope that people don't leave their doors and windows open with valuables on display.
I was going to say, Danny, I like your point on risk transfer. I'm going to now contradict myself. It's a good point that as part of resilience and insurance, you should definitely do a test, an exercise where you go, cool, we call the insurer, and because everyone's getting hit by Log4j, they cannot send us incident responders. What do we do? Because I know it's something the insurers are starting to get panicked by, of what happens in a systemic cyber, and where you can't just transfer the risk to them, because like you say, it's still your problem. So insurers help, but yeah, they're not a magic bullet, are they?
Nothing new under the sun. I mean, it's like, I remember back in days at NCC, everyone thought, oh, this was great. We've had we can now, if we lose power, we've got battery backup, and we've got a contract with a generator company who can come and big plug on the outside wall. Well, everybody's wants their generators all at once. What happened?
Or more importantly, the diesel for the generators, right? When they're running for more than 4 days. So it's we've got a contract with a local fuel company, but is your contract the biggest of the lot in the area, or is it one of the smallest, because you know who they're going to give the fuel to?
I think that's a
unexpected stuff. I remember back at NCC, we thought we'd done really well, because we had 2 pipes from 2 different companies feeding our internet connection. It was only when there was a fire in an underground conduit that we found that all the companies ran them through this same small
pipe,
and they were all melted together.
Sorry, Sam, go on.
No, I was just going to say, back to the demand for services, right, in the event of an incident, right, being vast. I think I personally read a study the other day from an organization called Veeam, where they've done a study of a lot of different people from this space, and they saw that if we just take ransomware, right, and ransomware isn't the only thing, but 85% of organizations have been hit in the last 12 months, and The thing that I found really interesting about the survey wasn't that statistic. It was the fact that the majority scenario for organizations wasn't being hit once. It was actually being hit 2 or 3 times, not just a single incident, but multiple incidents. So if we think about that with the volume of businesses, the amount of attacks, the demand for expertise to help protect or recover, or in the event of a crisis, help you remediate, is going to be vast. And I think that's a really great point to think about as you're planning for resilience in general.
I take it back to Merck. They had 100 PwC people to help rebuild their Active Directory. They also had 100 Microsoft engineers. What if everybody the size of Maersk, or even 2 or 3, needed it? You run out of Active Directory engineers very fast.
Well, apparently you just need one server under a desk in Africa to recover your AD. So
there you go.
We're good. Okay, so we've come to time. I'm going to give each of you an opportunity to give some of your sagest and most practical of advice to our listeners around, how they can be more cyber resilient. Let's put it in terms of, what should they be doing when they get to their desk tomorrow morning? What's the practical thing? So, Mike, I'm going to start with you here.
Go back and check if your backup data center, if it's mirrored, is that in real time, or is there a delay? So if you've got ransomware and your main environment got hit, does the resilient site get hit in real time, so it's completely useless and you have none at all?
It sounds so simple and so basic, but it's very good advice. Very good advice. Danny, let's go to you next.
Okay, well. Okay, I'll be cheeky because there's 2 things. Firstly, you go into work. What happens if you switch on and it doesn't? What are you going to do? Just think that through personally for yourself. And when you have got it working, you know what I'm going to do tonight? I'm going to go to ChatGPT and ask it to write me a resilience plan for a Russell Group University.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. And Sam?
I think resilience for me is a multi-department, multi-organization effort. And for me, it's about understanding the level of maturity that you have, right? So I think you should ask across the business a simple question, which would be, how comfortable are you if you were attacked tomorrow, that you feel confident that you can recover? And that level of confidence, I think understanding that from a metrics perspective across different areas of the business is really key. And if you're feeling less comfortable around that whole concept, when was the last time you tested the process to recover? And if the answer was a year ago, I think my advice would be that testing needs to be way more frequent. You need to be working across the business, and that's the way to deliver more maturity and confidence in that cyber resiliency strategy.
Brilliant. Thank you. So thank you, Daniel, Mike, and Sam, for today's conversation. Much appreciated. All that remains for me is to award the mug. We've had a couple of cheeky last-minute entries come in. Even though the conversation has ended, they decided to drop them in anyway. So I'm actually going to give it to the first question that was posed, which is Robert Sparks. We never actually quite got around to asking the question directly, but nonetheless, Robert, you are the proud owner of one of these. Well done. Congratulations. Better luck next time to you last-minute snipers out there trying to make that last bit effort. Let's see. So what have we got coming up next? Well, it's on the 14th, so that's next week. And we're going to be talking about, is your organization prepared for NIST 2? So obviously between now and then, I'll be looking up what NIST 2 is. And hopefully all of you will too as well. In the meantime, once again, Daniel, Mike, and Sam, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much as well.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. And thank you to our audience. And don't forget to stay secure, my friends.